It's a great pleasure to be here, especially to follow up on the panel discussion. We have heard several clear view about sort of whether privacy is a trade-off or simply a human right, right? So I'm going to use this opportunity to present actually an ongoing theoretical exercise to discuss potential trade-off with data privacy. So this is a joint project with Zhuang Liu at CU Education and Michael Salkin and the UT Austin. Isabella provided a very nice overview of GDPR. With GDPR in place, I think this lead to natural sort of demand for normative analysis of privacy regulation, all right? In fact, actually, I think economists have done extensive work on this area. However, I would mention with the risk of oversimplifying the previous literature, so the primary literature is really focusing on settings where consumers are rational, so they can protect themselves, right? So as the earlier sort of presentation already showed, this is a serious concern, right? We also need to worry about can consumers really take care of themselves, right? Maybe we need to protect the consumers from themselves. So this is sort of the setting I'm gonna get into. Is about what if consumers cannot always act on the best behalves of on their best behalves, right? And in this sort of regard, GDPR does sort of emphasize the need to give consumers sort of options and so that they can protect themselves, right? So in this sort of, especially give them the option to opt out. If you don't want to share your data, you can protect yourself by opting out of data sharing. But is this opt-out option sufficient in terms of protecting consumers? I want to actually provide a very sharp kind of situation, okay? So some of the consumers actually face temptation problem, okay? I think I don't have to explain what temptation is, right? So I would just simply mention two examples. One is gambling, the other is video games, right? Both are actually huge industries. Here's a figure showing that in 2018, the size of the global video game industry is about $138 billion, which is actually double the total size of music and the films combined. And the industry is projected to grow even faster in the future years, all right? In 2018, the World Health Organization for the first time actually recognized gaming disorder. Right? So I think the vast majority of the gamers are not really addicted. But on the other hand, I think it's fair to say some of them do struggle with addiction, right? Right? So in fact, actually, my Princeton colleague, Mark Agia, actually provided an estimate that the gaming actually reduced labor supply of young men in the United States by 1.5 to 3.1% since 2004. So in some sense, this is actually a serious macro problem, right? All right. So when sort of we start to worry about the gambling and the video game, so then we should also recognize actually they have been trying to using big data to target the potential players, right? Especially potential addicts. Okay, so this sort of is the general motivation for this exercise. Okay, it's easy to imagine. The usual sort of market solution, competition doesn't cure a temptation problem, right? In fact, the competition will motivate firms to explore consumer-bounded self-control even more, right? And they will make their products and advertisement even more tempting, and also they will work harder using big data to find the sort of precisely targeting potential players, right? And reminders and disclosures do not really reduce temptation. In fact, many of these addicts know they have problem, but on the other hand, they cannot help, right? So remind them doesn't really help. In fact, actually, the best way is just remove this from their options, right? So I think this is sort of the problem. So what we want to address here in this exercise is about how do data privacy affect the consumer temptation problem. Can allowing this GDPR solution, so giving the consumers the option to opt out, does that sufficiently protect those with this kind of problem, right? I'm going to show you a model, okay? So I think sort of by now we are sufficiently familiar with the setting, so we should get into sort of a more concrete situation. I will show you some algebra. I just can't help. And also I need to prepare you for Tom Sargent, which will show you much more serious stuff, all right? Right? So the model is actually quite simple. So we're going to consider ecosystem. You can think of this system surrounding the digital platform, which can track the users and as a result figure out different types of consumers. So we're going to consider sort of this simplified ecosystem with two consumption goods. So one called this good A. You can think of this as a normal good like music. All right. So there's also another good B. Think of this as a temptation good like a video game, all right? So in the ecosystem, we have a continuum of potential consumers with different types. Type S, this would be strong or willed. So this type, they're immune to the temptation problem. They will always reject this temptation could be, okay, at no cost. But on the other hand, type W, so this is the weak-willed group. So potentially can cave in to this temptation good if it's offered to them, if it's advertised to them, if it shows up on their cell phone or on their computer screen, they might not be able to resist the temptation to buy it or to play it. All right, so this is the type sort of we worry, okay, and we potentially sort of we need to think of how to protect them. All right, so we also include the type O. So this is a group they don't care about either good A or good B. All right, so they are there for some reason. So they are potentially sort of this group will provide camouflage for the W type. Okay. So this basically is sort of the setting we're confronting. In this ecosystem, we have this group of consumers. Some are strong-willed, have no problem. Some are weak-willed and potentially sort of facing this problem. And also we have type O there, sort of as general, sort of as noise in the we're going to have sort of a good seller A and the seller B. They need to sort of reach out to these consumers, sell their goods, right? So both Al and Chris mentioned quite a bit yesterday about sort of the usual frictions in searching and matching between the consumers and the sellers. So the big data going to play a very important role is about how to address this search friction, but at the same time dealing with the consumer's temptation problem. I'm going to adopt this very nice frame of Guo and Parsendorf in modeling temptation utility. Here I'm not going to go into the detail of how this utility works. So it builds on very nice somatic foundation, which makes normative analysis very convenient. That's why we're using this. Right, so U here is the normal utility, which we all familiar. So the Van Neumann-Morgenstern kind of utility. V here is the new one, the temptation utility. Each consumer facing the menu going to choose which product to choose. Say if A is on the menu or B is on the menu, which one they choose. In fact, they can choose both, right? So based on whether sort of the sum of U and the V add up to be more than the cost of the price of the good, right? But on the other hand, there's sort of this last term there, the max of V there, sort of is the temptation part. If the consumer turned out to reject the sort of a good on the menu with maximum temptation, even if you don't choose it, you actually suffer a mental cost. So the cost of resisting the temptation. All right. So here in our setting, we assume sort of a good A only offer the normal utility. All right. And the consumer vary in how much normal utility they enjoy, which is the alpha I coefficient there, which varies between 0 and 1. all right? And good B only offer temptation utility to consumers, all right? And in particular, only temptation utility to this weak-willed type W, okay? Again, there's some heterogeneity varying by this coefficient gamma I between 0 and 1, all right? So because of this matching or surge friction between sellers and consumers, sellers need to send costly advertisement to different consumers, right? So if facing for a consumer, if he faces a good B on the menu, right? So if you show the advertisement for this very tempting video game on your screen, strong-willed consumer always reject it because they don't have any sort of feeling for it. But the weak-willed actually might end up buying, okay, which costs money but really doesn't generate any genuine utility. And even if this consumer end up rejecting the good, so he still suffer a mental cost. All right, so in that way, so this sort of is about how to protect the consumer from themselves, right? If they're subject to this problem, so the best solution actually is to make sure sort of this advertisement doesn't show up on the screen, right? Let me mention quickly a baseline situation. Let's imagine there's no big data, so the seller have to basically reach out to all the potential consumers in the pool without any personal information. A seller A facing some costly search will send up a bunch of advertisement and with the same price because it cannot discriminate any of them, right? So this is what it will do. And the seller B will do the same. And the search is uninformative. And so the advertisement, some will hit the right audience, but some will miss it. Because for seller B, the ideal target is those in the orange color, right? But because without the personal information, many of them will miss target. This is costly. Now imagine if the platform can share personal information about these consumers, then the sellers can basically target the consumers more precisely, right? So this comes with, again, a clear gain. For seller A, which sells the normal good, it can precisely target its advertisement to the strong-willed and the weak-willed. Those actually do benefit from the good, right? So this is where the gain is, right? And those in this the green color and the orange color do benefit from this, all right? And the seller B also get to actually precisely target those weak-willed in the orange color, right? So they will search more, and this will allow seller B to reach out a lot more. Previously will be too costly, all right? So you can see sort of there's a trade-off. In fact, actually, we can see actually because of the gain of allowing seller A to reach out more effectively to the consumers. In fact, actually, the social gain is always there. Okay. However, this gain clearly is not Pareto because even if the surplus is there, those weak-willed are going to suffer, right? Because they are more exposed to the temptation good, right? So this is sort of the problem. And this motivates sort of, I guess, GDPR kind of a privacy regulation. So how to protect those potentially facing the temptation problem. Here, by using this temptation problem, this is just a way to sort of, you can take this as a metaphor. Even though I think it's a serious problem, but still I think this is sort of a metaphor, right? So just to highlighting this problem, some consumers have a potential problem and they need to hide from sellers, right? So I guess, sort of given the setup, we can do a simple exercise. How about given the consumers the option to opt out of data sharing, right? You can delete your data from the platform so that consumer cannot exactly figure out your type, right? So given the gain from opting in, you can imagine easily that the strong type, those in green color, they will always opt in because they can only gain, right? They gain from sort of a better exposure to the normal good seller A. And those in the light orange color, those sort of modestly tempted consumer will always will also opt in, right? Because they also gain from better access to the normal good seller, and they only suffer from modest temptation problem. They will also opt in. And of course, those severely tempted consumers will end up opting out, right? So they suffer from this problem very badly, so they want to hide themselves. So they will hide themselves. And let's imagine, so the default option for those type O, so those who do not care about any of this stuff, so let's say default is opting out, right? So then those severely tempted consumers will end up being pooled with those by default, the gray colored noise, right? So depending how big that group is, sort of, this is their protection, right? Given this, Solar still gonna reach out to those in opt-in group, right? And notice that because reaching out to those purple-colored weird consumer, this group, so they won't touch this because it's too costly. So sending ad to this group is noisy, it's not precise, right? So this will have lower priority. In that sense, in opting out, you not only sort of hide yourself from the temptation good, you're also hiding yourself from the normal good, which you want to actually have access to, right? So this is the cost of opting out, all right? And nevertheless, given this, consider the problem of seller B. Seller B actually going to reach out to both, right? Those who have chosen to opt in, those weak-willed consumer, those with modest temptation problem, given that they're revealed having this sort of problem, right? So seller B, we're trying to send the advertisement to them. But we're also trying to target those in the opt-out pool, right? In fact, those hiding in the opt-out pool actually have even more severe temptation problem, right? So they were actually targeting both. And in fact, given sort of those in the opt-out group actually have more severe problem, they're actually going to try to price discriminate them, right? If they can catch one, the price is actually going to be even higher, right? So given this, you can imagine sort of, we can evaluate, does the opt-out option protect the weak-willed? An easy way to look at this is look at the seller B's sales revenue. It turns out this opting out setting actually, the seller B can generate bigger revenue actually than the baseline, say all the consumers are anonymous. This is perhaps not surprising because strong-willed and the modest weak-willed will choose to opt in, right? So then leaving those severely tempted consumers in the opt-out pool. In fact, this gives sort of the seller B even greater incentive to search the opt-out pool, right? And in fact, actually, it will try to even price discriminate those in the opt-out pool, right? So putting this together, the bottom line is that this opt-out option may not sufficiently protect weak-willed consumers, right? There is sort of the usual externality. So I guess sort of this is sort of the question at the various occasions this come up, right? Will private sector incentive provide sufficient protection to consumers, right? So here is a situation, there's externality. The strong-willed and the modestly weak-willed will choose to opt in and exposing severely weak-willed in the opt-out pool, right? And especially when you imagine sort of the cover-up, the type O, if that group is small, then actually those severely weak-willed are actually quite exposed, right? So this is sort of the trouble. And given this, actually, I want to quickly mention another important issue. In the setting I examined so far, consumers sort of face this bundled choice, right? Either you share data from both seller A and seller B, right? So the decision is bundled. So here, there's this sort of a very important issue. Instead of bundling data sharing with all sellers, an alternative would be to let consumers actually make separate choices of data sharing. So each consumer can share with seller A, but not seller B, right? So in fact, this will be clearly preferred because we will get the unbundled equilibrium in which all consumers opt in for seller A, and same time all consumers opt out for seller B. I should mention that this is sort of a bit of fragile equilibrium in the sense that strong-willed and those type O agents are really kind of indifferent, right? They are kind of indifferent between opt-in and opt-out. So in that sense, sort of a slight incentive actually can motivate them to opt-in, right? And if they opt-in, they will basically leave sort of those tempted consumers again in the opt-out pool, right? We're sort of getting the sort of externality problem back again, right? So given that the time is out, so let me sort of end with this quick summary of policy implications. So basically, I showed you a simple exercise. This is really a toy model. It's by no means realistic, but it shows you that this opt-in and opt-out policy may not sufficiently protect the weak-willed consumers from temptation good sellers, right? Because of this externality I mentioned. Motivated by gains from opting in, strong-willed and modestly weak-willed consumers might leave severely weak-willed in the opt-out pool.